Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I work at a mid-sized accounting firm in Denver. Started there about 3 years ago as a junior accountant, and it's been a pretty decent place to work. Good benefits, reasonable hours most of the time, and generally nice people. The kind of office where everyone brings donuts on their birthday and we celebrate each other's promotions. The office kitchen is nothing fancy, just a microwave, coffee maker, small fridge, and a sink. Most people bring their own mugs and keep them in the cupboard or at their desks. It's an unspoken rule that you don't mess with other people's stuff. Last summer, my girlfriend and I took our first vacation together to Hawaii. We spent a week on Maui, did all the touristy things, and I picked up this beautiful souvenir mug from a little shop near Haleakala. Bright blue ceramic with this gorgeous volcano design painted on it. The kind of thing that makes you smile every morning when you're drinking your coffee and remembering palm trees instead of cubicles. When I got back to work, I brought the mug with me. I even took a Sharpie and wrote my name clearly on the bottom, not because I'm paranoid, but because I'd learned from experience that office kitchens can be black holes for personal items. I kept it in the cupboard with everyone else's mugs and used it every day for my morning coffee. That's where our friend from sales comes in. This guy had been with the company for about 5 years, so he had seniority on me. He was one of those people who acted like the office was his personal kingdom. You know the type, takes up 2 parking spaces, microwaves fish in the break room, never refills the coffee pot after taking the last cup. It started small. I go to make my morning coffee, and my mug would be sitting in the sink, still dirty from whoever used it. The first time I figured maybe someone grabbed it by mistake. These things happen, right? I washed it out and didn't think much of it. But then it kept happening. Every few days I'd find my mug dirty in the sink. I started paying attention and noticed this guy from sales using it. One morning I even watched him walk right past 3 other clean mugs in the cupboard to grab mine specifically. I decided to handle it like an adult. I walked over to his desk during lunch break and told him I thought he'd been using my mug by mistake. I explained it was the blue one with the volcano design. He admitted he'd been using it like it was no big deal. I asked him to maybe use one of the other mugs instead since it was actually mine and I brought it back from vacation. He leaned back in his chair and gave me this smirk that made my blood pressure spike. He dismissed it by saying it was just a mug. I pointed out that it was my mug, and my name was literally written on the bottom. He told me that since it was sitting in the office kitchen, if I didn't want people using it, I should keep it at my desk. He called me kid and acted like I was being unreasonable for wanting to use my own property. I told him I shouldn't have to hide my stuff because he couldn't respect other people's belongings. He brushed me off, saying it wasn't that serious, and turned back to his computer like the conversation was over. I stood there for a second, feeling my face get hot. 3 years of being the nice guy, the team player, the one who never rocks the boat, and this guy couldn't even be bothered to show basic courtesy. I went back to my desk and tried to focus on work, but I was fuming. It wasn't really about the mug anymore. It was about the principle, the casual entitlement, the assumption that he could just take whatever he wanted because what was I going to do about it? That weekend I was at home stewing about it. My girlfriend was listening to me rant while she fed her cat. She jokingly suggested I should make it so gross he never wanted to touch it again. Something clicked when I looked at the can of cat food in her hand, some kind of salmon pate that smelled absolutely revolting even to me. And I like cats. The plan came together pretty quickly. On Saturday, I took my mug home and very carefully smeared a thin layer of the cat food under the rim, just enough to create an odor, but not visible if you weren't looking for it. Then I sealed it in a plastic bag and let it sit for the weekend. Monday morning, I brought the mug back to work. I washed the outside thoroughly, dried it completely, and put it back in the cupboard. To anyone looking, it was perfectly clean. I made my coffee in a different mug that day and waited. Around 10:30, I saw him walk into the kitchen. I didn't follow, that would have been too obvious, but I positioned myself where I could see the break room entrance. He came out a few minutes later with my mug, looking pleased with himself. I had to admire his commitment to being a jerk. By 11, people started making comments. One co-worker asked if anyone else smelled something weird. Another agreed and wondered what that smell was. They said it smelled like something died in the break room. I watched him take another sip and see his face change. He looked confused at first, then disgusted. He held the mug away from his face and sniffed it. Around 11:30, the smell had gotten worse. Someone asked what that smell was because it was making them nauseous. Another person said it smelled like someone microwaved a dead fish wrapped in garbage. By this point, our sales guy was looking green, around the gills. He kept taking tiny sips of his coffee and making faces like he was trying to convince himself it was fine. The commitment was almost impressive. Around noon, he couldn't take it anymore. I watched him storm into the kitchen and dumped the entire mug of coffee into the sink. He scrubbed it out aggressively, but the smell had gotten into his sinuses because he kept making these disgusted sounds. He grabbed his jacket and left early. Didn't even tell his supervisor he was going. I didn't say a word. I just went about my day like nothing had happened. When people asked about the smell, I shrugged and said I hadn't noticed anything unusual. Later that afternoon, I started the conversation with a few co-workers about office etiquette. I mentioned how it really bugged me when people used other people's personal stuff without asking. One co-worker enthusiastically agreed, saying that just because something was in the kitchen didn't mean it was communal property. Another shared how someone kept using their lunch containers and never washed them, so they finally had to take them home. The conversation naturally evolved into everyone sharing their pet peeves about office courtesy. Nothing directly about our sales guy, but the message was clear. The next day, he showed up with a sleeve of disposable paper cups. He's been using those ever since. The few times I've seen him in the break room, people literally leave. Word travels fast in a small office, and everyone knows something happened with his coffee, even if they don't know exactly what. My mug is back on my desk now, thoroughly cleaned and smelling like nothing but coffee and satisfaction. Back in 2009, I was fresh out of grad school with my master's degree in hand and ready to make my mark in the environmental consulting world. It had been a long road getting there, growing up in a small town where most people thought college was optional, let alone graduate school. My parents worked double shifts at the local factory just to help me pay for my education. I was the first person in my family to get any kind of advanced degree. I've been working in the field for about 3 years after finishing my bachelor's, gaining experience with soil contamination projects and environmental impact assessments. Those 10 years my friend mentioned when introducing me included my undergraduate studies, internships, and work experience. I wasn't lying about anything. I had genuinely been involved in this field for a decade, even if my formal career was shorter. The conference was a big deal for me. I'd been invited to speak on a panel about emerging technologies in environmental remediation. I was nervous but excited. At 28, I was definitely the youngest person on the panel and one of only 3 women at the entire conference. I prepared for weeks, rehearsing my presentation and researching every possible question they might ask. That's when our mutual friend, an older gentleman who'd been my mentor, walked over with someone in tow. The guy looked to be in his 50s, wearing an expensive suit and had this air about him like he owned the place. My mentor introduced me as one of the rising stars in the field, mentioning that I had over 10 years of experience and had just finished my master's degree. I smiled and extended my hand for a professional handshake. I was genuinely excited to meet another professional in my field and told him I was looking forward to hearing his thoughts on the panel discussion. The man looked at my outstretched hand like it was something disgusting. He actually took a step back and made this face like he'd smelled something rotten. He sneered at me and said he had more experience than I had years alive, calling me little girl. He turned away without another word, walking off to talk to some other men in suits. I stood there with my hand still extended, feeling my face burn with embarrassment. My mentor looked shocked and tried to apologize, but the damage was done. I spent the rest of the conference wondering what I'd done wrong, replaying that moment over and over. The panel went well despite my shaken confidence. But that interaction stuck with me. I understood why someone would be so cruel to a complete stranger. I'd never met him before, never had any professional dealings with him, never even heard his name mentioned in my circles. Years passed and I threw myself into my work. I moved to the city, got a job with a mid-sized consulting firm, then eventually landed a position with a major environmental agency. I worked my way up through promotions, handling bigger projects, managing teams, building relationships with clients. The sting of that conference interaction faded but never completely disappeared. By 2015, I was a senior project manager overseeing multiple contamination cleanup sites. By 2020, I was running an entire division. The agency grew too, and we started hiring external contractors when our internal teams were stretched too thin. That's when his name started appearing on contractor applications. The first time I saw it on a list of potential hires, I did a double take. Could it be the same person? A quick internet search confirmed it. Same company, same arrogant headshot. On his firm's website, same sneering expression I remembered from all those years ago. My colleague asked what I thought about this contractor, noting that his firm had good references. I told her I had some concerns about working with him, explaining that I'd had a negative professional interaction with him years ago that raised red flags about his attitude toward colleagues. I told the story, how he'd refused to even shake my hand, how he'd dismissed my experience without knowing anything about me, how unprofessional the whole encounter had been. My colleagues were horrified. One colleague said it was completely unacceptable behavior and that we have someone like that representing our agency with clients. Him getting passed over for that first contract felt like a small victory, but I figured it was probably a one-time thing. Except it wasn't. Over the next few years, his name kept appearing on contractor lists for different projects. Each time I'd share my story about his unprofessional behavior, and each time the hiring committee would decide to go with someone else. It wasn't personal revenge. I genuinely believe that someone who treats colleagues that way isn't someone we should trust with important projects. If he could be that dismissive and rude to someone he just met at a professional conference, how would he treat our clients? How would he work with our junior staff members? The last time his name came up was just a few months ago for a major cleanup project worth over $2 million. It would have been a career-defining contract for his firm. One committee member mentioned that this guy's firm had the technical expertise we needed, but noted that I had flagged him before. I told them I had serious concerns about his professionalism and ability to work collaboratively, then offered to tell them about an interaction I'd had with him. I told the story again, watching their faces change when I described his behavior. By the end, they were shaking their heads in disgust. The same committee member said we risk having someone like that on such a high-profile project, wondering what would happen if he treated our stakeholders that way. Another committee member agreed and suggested we go with a firm from Portland instead. When I walked back to my office after that meeting, I smiled. He probably has no idea that the woman whose hand he refused to shake 15 years ago is now in a position to influence whether his firm gets major contracts. He might not even remember me. I was probably just another forgettable young woman to him, but I remember him perfectly. And every time I tell that story to a hiring committee, they remember it too. His 30 seconds of arrogance at a conference in 2009 has probably cost his firm hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost contracts over the years. It's not even revenge. I'm just doing my job, making sure we hire contractors who will represent our agency professionally and work well with our diverse team. His own behavior disqualified him long before I ever had any power to influence the decision. My wife and I moved to this neighborhood about 5 years ago, when our son was just 3. We picked this house because it had a huge backyard with this massive oak tree that looked perfect for a treehouse. I'm pretty handy with tools, so I spent months planning and building what would be the perfect hideaway for my boy. The treehouse wasn't just some thrown-together platform. I put real effort into it with sturdy wooden walls, a proper roof, even little windows with shutters. It was about 8 feet off the ground, accessible by a wooden ladder I built myself. My son loved it. He'd spend hours up there reading comic books, playing with his action figures, or just hanging out with his friends from the neighborhood. Everything was great until Karen moved in next door about 2 years ago. She had a son around the same age as mine, and at first I thought it would be nice for the boys to have a playmate so close by. Karen's son had some serious behavioral issues. Don't get me wrong, all kids act up sometimes, but this kid was different. He had these explosive tantrums whenever things didn't go his way. The first few times he came over to play in the treehouse, everything seemed fine. But then the problems started. About 6 months ago, the kids were up in the treehouse playing some card game. I was in the garage working on my car when I heard shouting. Karen's son had lost the game and completely lost it. He started throwing the cards everywhere, then grabbed my son's favorite toy cars and hurled them out of the treehouse. One of them was a vintage model car my dad had given my son, and it smashed to pieces when it hit the ground. The kid then started kicking the walls of the treehouse, trying to break the wooden panels I'd carefully installed. My son came running to me in tears, telling me what happened. When I went to check the damage, I found scratch marks on the wood and one of the window shutters hanging loose. I talked to Karen about it the next day, trying to be diplomatic. I explained what happened and suggested maybe her son needed to work on managing his emotions before playing with other kids. Karen got defensive and started yelling about how I was blaming her son for normal kid behavior. She said that boys will be boys and that her son had every right to play in the treehouse. She even claimed that I didn't own the sky above my yard. That conversation went nowhere. I decided the safest thing was to tell my son that Karen's boy couldn't play in the treehouse anymore, at least until he learned to control his temper. My son understood and was honestly relieved because he'd been walking on eggshells every time the kid came over. For a few months, things were quiet. Karen would give us dirty looks over the fence, and I could hear her complaining loudly to other neighbors about how unfair we were being. Last Tuesday changed everything. It was a beautiful afternoon, and my son had two of his friends over. They were up in the treehouse playing some imagination game about being explorers. I was inside making them some snacks when I heard Karen's voice getting louder and louder outside. I looked out the kitchen window and saw Karen standing at the bottom of the tree, with her son next to her. She was yelling up at the kids, demanding that they let her son up there right now because he lived next door and had rights. My son tried to explain that his dad said the boy couldn't come up because of what happened before, but Karen screamed that she didn't care what I had said and called the situation ridiculous. I went outside to handle the situation. I told Karen she needed to leave my property and reminded her that we'd been through this already. She refused to leave and said she wasn't going anywhere until the kids stopped being bullies and let her son play. I explained again that her son had damaged my property and scared my kid, and until he could prove he wouldn't have another meltdown, he wasn't welcome in the treehouse. Karen did something I never expected. She started climbing the ladder herself, a grown woman climbing up to a kid's treehouse like some kind of maniac. She yelled that if I wouldn't be reasonable, she'd handle it herself. I shouted at her to get down and told her she was trespassing, but she kept climbing. When she reached the top, she squeezed herself through the entrance. The treehouse was definitely not built for adults because it was cramped with just the 3 kids up there. Karen demanded that all the kids get out so she could settle this like adults. My son's friend Jake told her that she couldn't be up there because it wasn't her treehouse. Karen screamed that everyone needed to share and ordered all of them to get out so her son could have a turn. My son tried to explain that this was his treehouse and that his dad had built it for him. Everything went wrong. Karen grabbed my son by the shoulders and started pushing him toward the entrance. She called him a little brat and said he needed to learn about sharing. My son cried out for me to help him while he tried to get away from her. I was already at the base of the ladder starting to climb up when I heard the scuffle above. Karen was getting more aggressive, and my son was trying to get away from her. Jake yelled at her to stop pushing him, and Tommy shouted that she was hurting him. Karen screamed back that my son needed to learn some manners. Then I heard the worst sound a parent can hear, my child screaming in terror, followed by a thud that made my heart stop. My son had fallen out of the treehouse and landed hard on the ground below. He was crying and clutching his leg, unable to stand up. Karen's son was still on the ground, looking horrified at what his mother had done. I rushed to my son's side while my wife came running from the house. His leg was clearly broken because it was bent at an unnatural angle. Karen climbed down from the treehouse, going into damage control mode. She kept apologizing and claiming she didn't mean for that to happen. She said that his foot must have slipped and that she was trying to help him down safely when he fell on his own. I accused her of pushing him, saying I had seen her grab him. She denied it, claiming she was just trying to help. But Jake and Tommy weren't having any of her lies. They both said they had seen her push him on purpose and that she had grabbed him and shoved him toward the edge. Karen tried to dismiss their testimony, claiming the kids didn't know what they were talking about and were just trying to get her in trouble. My wife was already on the phone with emergency services while I tried to keep my son calm and still. The paramedics arrived within minutes and confirmed what we already knew: his leg was definitely broken. When they were loading my son into the ambulance, Karen kept trying to spin her story. She claimed she had been asking her son to talk to mine, to work things out like kids do. She said when her son didn't want to get involved, she thought she'd go up and mediate because she was just trying to help everyone get along. But her own son contradicted her. He told everyone that his mom had told him to push my son out, but he had said no. Then she got mad and did it herself. Karen told her son to shut up and claimed he didn't know what he was saying. Her own child was telling the truth about what really happened. At the hospital, the doctors confirmed that my son had a clean break in his tibia. He'd need surgery and would be in a cast for at least 8 weeks. Thankfully, there was no damage to his head or spine because the way he landed, his leg took the full impact and probably saved him from much worse injuries. While we were at the hospital, the police came to take statements. Jake and Tommy's parents brought them in to give their accounts of what happened. All 3 boys told the same story. Karen had deliberately pushed my son out of the treehouse after he refused to leave. The police arrested Karen that evening. She is currently in jail awaiting trial for assault on a minor and trespassing. Her husband is trying to get her a good lawyer, but with 3 witnesses and her own son's testimony, I don't think it's going to help much. My son is recovering well, considering everything. He's disappointed about missing the rest of soccer season, but he's been amazingly brave through all of this. The treehouse has been off limits since the incident because honestly, I'm not sure if he'll ever want to go back up there after what happened. We've decided to pursue this case to the fullest extent of the law. Karen had no right to come onto our property, let alone put her hands on our child. She's trying to claim it was an accident just makes it worse. Some people in the neighborhood think we should just let it go since no permanent damage was done, but I disagree. Karen made a choice to escalate a simple situation into violence against a child. She needs to face what comes from that choice. The trial is set for next month. Our lawyer is confident we have a strong case. And honestly, Karen sealed her own fate when she started changing her story and her own son contradicted her. I'm 16 now and my older brother just moved out 2 months ago. I thought things would get better when he left, but it's just made me realize how messed up my childhood really was. My brother is 20 and has something called misophonia. He got diagnosed when he was 7, which means I was only 4 at the time. From what I understand, it's a condition where certain sounds trigger really strong negative reactions in him. The problem is, pretty much every sound I made seemed to be one of his triggers. My laugh was the worst one. I remember being 6 years old, sitting in the back seat of our car, and I laughed at something funny I saw outside. My dad immediately started screaming at me, asking what was wrong with me and telling me I knew I couldn't do that when my brother was there. When I tried to explain that I just thought something was funny, he told me he didn't care what I thought and that I was being selfish. That's when I learned that my existence was basically a problem that needed to be managed. My walking was too loud. My eating was too noisy. Even my breathing seemed to bother him sometimes. My parents' solution was simple: keep me away from him as much as possible. Dinner time was the worst. Every single night my parents would sit down to eat with my brother while I waited in my room. Only when he finished and left the table could I come down to get my food. I'd eat alone in the kitchen while my parents cleaned up or watched TV. My mom would tell me to wait a few more minutes because my brother was almost done eating. When I was maybe 7, I asked if I could just eat really quietly, genuinely thinking I could be extra careful. But my mom reminded me that we had tried that before and it didn't work. Even the sound of my fork touching the plate was too much. Family outings were rare, and when they happened, I felt like I was walking on eggshells the entire time. We'd go to the park or the mall, and my parents would constantly be watching me, ready to shush me or pull me aside if I made any noise. I learned to barely speak above a whisper in public. Even at school, I was the quiet kid who never laughed during funny moments because I was so used to suppressing any natural reactions. My teachers started calling home because they were worried about how withdrawn I was. They told my parents that I barely participated in class discussions and just sat by myself during recess. My mom would brush off their concerns, saying I was just shy and that some kids were like that. But I wasn't naturally shy. I was trained to be invisible. The worst part was that I spent most of my childhood thinking this was normal. I thought every family had one kid who had to eat separately and couldn't laugh around their sibling. It wasn't until I started spending more time at friends' houses that I realized how weird my situation was. My friends would ask why I never invited them over to my place. I'd explain that my brother didn't like noise, but they'd point out that their siblings didn't like when they were loud either, but they could still have friends over. I couldn't explain that. It wasn't just about being loud. It was about my very presence being a trigger for someone else's medical condition, and my parents had decided that the easiest solution was to just remove me from the equation whenever possible. When my brother finally moved out for college and then got his own apartment, I thought my parents would finally start treating me like a normal daughter. Instead, they seemed confused about how to interact with me. We'd lived like strangers in the same house for so long that none of us knew how to be a family. 2 weeks ago, my mom started trying to plan activities with me. She asked if I wanted to go shopping that weekend. Just the two of us. I told her I had plans with friends. She asked about the next weekend, and I said I'd probably be busy then too. This morning, she asked again about going to see a movie together. She mentioned there was that new movie I had wanted to see and suggested we could go that afternoon. I was already stressed about upcoming exams, and something about her hopeful tone just made me snap. I told her I didn't want to go to a movie with her. When she asked why not and said she thought it would be nice to spend time together, I exploded. I told her to stop trying to fix things with me because she couldn't just watch a movie with me and pretend like the last 12 years didn't happen. She asked what I was talking about, so I laid it all out. I told her she had neglected me, that she and Dad had chosen my brother over me every single day, and that now that he was gone, she wanted to play happy family. I said it didn't work like that. My mom got defensive and said that wasn't fair. She insisted they were doing the best they could with a difficult situation, that my brother had a medical condition, and they were trying to help him cope. She claimed they never wanted to neglect me. I shot back that they did neglect me anyway. I asked if she had any idea what it was like being a kid and thinking that everything about me was wrong, that I was too loud, too annoying, too much. That's when she really lost it. She accused me of just being jealous of my brother, saying they gave him the support he needed, and now I was acting like a spoiled brat because I didn't get enough attention. That's when I walked out. Both my parents have been giving me the silent treatment all day, which is pretty ironic considering how much of my childhood was spent in silence. I do love my parents. I know they were trying to help my brother, and I understand that his condition is real and difficult, but they made me feel like I was the problem that needed to be solved instead of finding ways to help both of their children. Now they want to rebuild our relationship, but they still don't seem to understand what they put me through. They keep acting like I'm being dramatic or jealous instead of acknowledging that their solution to my brother's condition was to erase me from family life. I've been thinking about it all day, and I realize that I'm not even angry anymore. I'm just tired. Tired of feeling guilty for existing, tired of walking on eggshells, and tired of pretending that 12 years of isolation didn't affect me. My brother moved out, but the damage was already done. I learned to be alone, and now that's all I know how to be. My parents want to fix things now, but they don't want to admit that there's anything that needs fixing in the first place. Maybe someday we'll figure out how to be a real family, but it's going to take a lot more than a movie and some shopping trips to undo a lifetime of being treated like an inconvenience in my own home. My sister and her husband have always been the type to make a big show of their generosity, especially since they moved to the UK and started earning in pounds. Every time they visit, it's all about flashing their money and making sure everyone knows how well they're doing abroad. I'm happy for their success, but they use it like a weapon sometimes. They've been living in the UK for about 3 years now, and every visit home becomes this performance where they pick up every restaurant bill, buy expensive gifts nobody asked for, and constantly remind us how much everything costs back there. My sister has always had this competitive streak with me since we were kids. If I got a new dress, she needed a better one. If I did well in school, she had to do better. Moving abroad just gave her more ammunition. When they announced they were organizing a 2-day beach resort trip as their farewell treat before heading back, I should have seen the strings attached. They insisted on paying for everything, booking the nicest place they could find, and making sure everyone knew this was their gift to the family. My parents were over the moon, my other siblings were excited, and honestly, I was looking forward to some quality family time. The first day was actually perfect. We had this amazing beachfront suite, the weather was gorgeous, and everyone was genuinely having fun. My sister was in her element, playing the generous host, making sure everyone had drinks, ordering the most expensive items on the menu. She kept making comments about how expensive everything was, mentioning that the lobster cost almost $200, but saying it was worth it for a special occasion like this. The rest of us just smiled and enjoyed ourselves. My brother and cousin were there too, and we spent the evening playing cards and sharing stories. It felt like old times before money and status became such a big thing in our family. Then came day 2. I woke up excited for another great day. I packed this new swimsuit I'd bought specifically for the trip. It was nothing too fancy, just something that made me feel confident. Before the trip, my sister had asked to borrow her favorite swimsuit of mine, this blue one she always compliments. I completely forgotten to pack it, but I brought an extra suit just in case. When I offered her the extra one, she seemed fine with it. She said it was cute and thanked me for bringing it along. Everything seemed normal until I came out wearing my new swimsuit. I was planning to take some photos by the beach when I noticed her staring. She suddenly said she wanted to wear my new swimsuit instead. I told her no, explaining that she already had the other one I brought for her. She insisted she liked mine better and asked if I could just wear the extra one. I refused, reminding her that this was the one I brought for myself and that she had said she was fine with the other one. She gave me this look like I'd just insulted her personally. I went outside to take my photos. The beach was beautiful, and I was having a great time taking pictures with my other sisters. About an hour later, my older sister came running over. She told me I needed to come back to the room because something was wrong. When I got back, my sister and her husband were packing their bags like they were escaping a fire. I asked what was going on, and her husband explained that they needed to leave early to prepare for their flight back to the UK. This made no sense. Their flight wasn't for another 3 days, and they'd made such a big deal about this being a proper 2-day trip. My sister added that they just realized they had so much to do before leaving the country. She wouldn't even look at me directly. Then she turned to my brother and cousin, telling them they needed to come along since they all came in the same car. My brother looked confused but started packing anyway. Our cousin tried to protest, saying he was really looking forward to the second day and asking if they could just take a taxi back later. Her husband said no, that they were all leaving together immediately. Within an hour, they were gone. Just like that, our perfect family trip was cut short. The rest of us were left standing in the resort lobby, completely confused about what had just happened. Then the real surprise came. The resort manager approached us with a bill for the remaining night, plus charges for the restaurant, spa services, and room service that hadn't been paid yet. He explained that there was still a balance of $1,500 on our reservation. My parents went pale. None of us had that kind of money just lying around. I told the manager that my sister and her husband were supposed to cover everything, but he explained that the card they used was declined for the additional charges. Someone needed to settle this before we could check out. We ended up having to pool our money together draining everyone's savings just to cover the bill. My parents had to use their emergency fund. It was humiliating and completely ruined what was supposed to be a celebration. I was furious. But I'm not the type to let something like this slide. I knew my sister's weak spot, her reputation. She cares more about how she looks to others than anything else. I started with a simple group chat message to all our extended family and family friends, sharing photos from our amazing beach trip that my sister organized. I mentioned that, unfortunately, she had to leave early due to an emergency, but thankfully she made sure to cover all the expenses before she left. I wrote about what a thoughtful host she was, then I posted the photos on social media, tagging everyone who was there, and writing about what an incredible, fully paid vacation it was. I made sure to mention how generous and responsible my sister was as a host. Within hours, the comments started pouring in from relatives congratulating her on her generosity. Her UK friends were commenting about what a wonderful sister she was. Her mother-in-law even shared the post, gushing about what a thoughtful daughter-in-law she had. Then my phone started ringing. My sister was asking what I was doing and why I was posting about the trip like that. I explained that I was just sharing the lovely photos and thanking her for the wonderful, fully paid vacation, asking if that wasn't what happened. She started to say that wasn't exactly right, that they had to leave early because of an emergency. I acknowledged that I mentioned the emergency, but asked if she made sure everything was paid for before she left, like a responsible host would. The silence on the other end was beautiful. I continued saying that I assumed she wouldn't leave her family stranded with a $1,500 bill after promising to cover everything, because that would be so embarrassing if people found out. She asked how much the bill was. I told her it was $1,500 plus the gas money for the car trip that she was supposed to cover and the taxi fares we had to pay to get home. Her husband got on the phone and said they could send some money but couldn't cover all of that right now. I told them that was fine and that I'd just update my social media posts to reflect that. I said I was sure everyone would understand that emergencies happen, and I just mentioned how we all had to chip in to cover the costs when they left early over the swimsuit situation. My sister asked if I would really do that. I told her to try me, asking if her reputation wasn't worth more than $1,500. Within 2 hours, the money was transferred to my account. Not just the resort bill and gas money, but an extra $500 as an apology for the misunderstanding. My sister texted me later asking if I was happy. I replied that I was very happy and thanked her for the lovely vacation. I suggested that next time maybe she should pack her own swimsuits. All those social media posts are still up and she can't ask me to take them down without admitting that she lied about covering everything. Every time someone likes or comments on those photos, she gets a little reminder of how her entitlement backfired. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.